Thank you, Margaret Owens. So, good morning, everyone. Almost afternoon. Did you all look on the purple page and see that my topic is what's my responsibility? I so wanted to just be here in the sanctuary watching people look at that, watching the faces go, it's going to be a talk about taking responsibility. Oh, goody. Oh, my God. Finally. Why didn't I bring all my friends? I was thinking, one of the things that was hard for me was that we couldn't get word out to everyone in the neighborhood. I mean, we would have had lines around the sanctuary, standing room only. Am I being a little facetious? Is that irresponsible of me? Well, yes, I am being a little facetious because I think that the idea of responsibility and taking responsibility doesn't necessarily evoke a sense of delight, does it? But, hello? You are responsible for responding. Okay? I really don't think that's the immediate response that we have. But here's what I'm going to tell you. It really should be. It really should be. When we look at what responsibility and taking responsibility means, I think we're going to see it is our pathway into greater good. The last few weeks, we had our Journey of the Heart program where we asked people to think about what they would like to contribute to this community over the next year for us to develop our spending plan. And our theme was your heart's desire, and encouraging people to really, really think about their heart's desire and that actually becoming a reality, and we support everyone in that. And this, taking responsibility, is a way to have our heart's desires realized. Now, understandably, I think the topic can give rise to a sense of consternation or a little bit of confusion, because responsibility can sound onerous, right? It's like, responsibility is taking something on that we would much rather pass off to someone else. And I'll say that in new thought traditions, like religious science, it can be even a little bit more challenging. Like we can create a little bit more of a sense of stress and angst around that topic, because one of the big ideas that we promote in our teaching is the creative power of our thinking, right? We emphasize that the predominant tendencies of how we see things, what we believe, our thoughts, contribute and shape our life circumstances. And then on top of it, we hit you with the information that, and guess what? The new science of quantum physics is corroborating that quantum physics is proving that the way you actually look at something in the world can change the molecular structure of things in the world. So your thought is very powerful. So it could all be your fault. Right? But at the core of our teaching is the idea that God's nature is ever present within and around us, in every moment, ever available for us to call it forth, to experience it, and to express it. And any lack or discord that we're experiencing is due to our individual and collective thoughts of being separate from God, separate from one another, and we're just not fully awake yet. We haven't fully evolved to realize our oneness with God. But the more we do, the more we find ways to overcome those false limiting beliefs, the more we experience God's nature in our lives. So that can be seen as, I guess, good news and bad news. Sometimes people say that's a double-edged sword. The good news is that if there's anything in your life that you're not happy about, you have the capacity to change that and have a better experience with it. The bad news is you have to give up blaming everything out there. But let me tell you, that really isn't bad news. And it really isn't a double-edged sword. Because when we give up blame, we give up feeling victimized by the world, and ultimately we find ways to experience more good. So that can only be good news. There, But here's where it gets tricky. I'm often questioned about the degree to which we individually can take responsibilities for the tendencies of our thought, creating the conditions in the world and in our lives. It's the old, are you saying that I single-handedly, with the predominant tendencies of my thoughts, created this condition of illness that I'm faced with? Are you saying I did that? That I brought about all the circumstances that led to this financial challenge that I'm facing right now? That I caused the company I work for to go out of business? Am I supposed to take responsibility for all the different forms of violence and lack out there in the world? How creative am I? How powerful am I? Do I affect the economic ups and downs? Do I create that boss's attitude toward me, or that conflict or that anger that my spouse seems to always be expressing toward me? Am I doing that? How much of this can we ascribe to ourselves as being the creators of what's going on in the immediate world? And to make it more confusing for you, I'd say in this realm of New Thought traditions, the theories around this run the gamut all the way from that each of us is creating everything that's happening in our world, in our lives. It's almost like you are on the holodeck in Star Trek, where they go out into this area and then all of a sudden they create a reality and everything that's happening is coming out of that player's mind. There are those that believe that each of us is walking around creating the reality that we're experiencing. And then there's a realm that I think most of us fall into, and what you'll hear more often in Science of Mind, is that we are all interconnected in this one life of God. We each contain God's nature in us, and that we're all individually and collectively creating circumstances in our lives and how they're playing out. So as we more and more collectively start to believe, for example, in this solution to this kind of illness, as we more collectively believe in all the ways to heal relationships and open up to more love, as more and more of us believe in that and believe in our oneness, we'll see more and more of that in the world. In the midst of that, we can look at, okay, it's worth it for me to look at the idea that maybe my thoughts about people like that are very suspicious. I'm not going to interact with that kind of person. Or, those kinds of situations should be avoided at all costs. Or, I don't know if I'm really worthy of that kind of happiness. Or even, this is the only way that I can be happy. I think we can look at those kinds of thought patterns and say, well, I can see how that might contribute to me not having as much love in my life, or how that might create some conflict with those people that I automatically think are suspicious, or that I don't get involved in a lot of things because I don't feel worthy. I can see how that would play out in my life and do something to change that. But I can also accept that I am not in control of other people's free will, which is really annoying, but that it's not up to me to, change everyone else, that they have their own process of evolution. They're waking up in their own way. And so I can't necessarily take on everything that's going on around me. But here's the good news about this, is that whether you ascribe to the idea that, or this thought that everything that's out there is something that you're creating, or that you're creating some of it, but it's also the effect of other people's beliefs, and you can't necessarily change everything out there in the world. What you can do in both scenarios is change your experience of it and somehow call forth that nature of God that's there no matter what, and experience it. We can always have an experience of God no matter what's going on in the world, because as we say, God is fully and equally present in every moment, in every situation. So we can take responsibility for how we're responding to what's going on out there. We have, I was thinking of this as looking at it, we have the response ability. We have the ability to look at how we're responding to things and respond in a way that brings forth greater good. In each scenario, we can make good of any negativity that we're experiencing. You know, I believe that the whole purpose of this journey of life that we're going through is God, every moment, is seeking to awaken to itself, to know its nature, to experience more of its lovingness, its joyfulness, its abundance, its wholeness through each of us. And so the purpose of everything that comes our way is to help us to recognize our oneness with God. So for every situation that unfolds in our life, we have the responsibility, the ability to look within and respond in a way that reflects love, that reflects a sense of greater possibilities to be revealed, that reveals something. It's a response that reveals a knowingness that God is here to make good of everything that we're confronted with. I would say that the situations that we label as good, the joyful ones, the experiences of love, the experience of abundance, those are ways that we're aligned with that divine nature. And as we experience it, we grow, right? The more we feel love and we give love, the more we're open to it expanding. The more we experience abundance, the more generous we are, the more open we are to all the ways that abundance can be known and realized. So we grow from that. But then when a challenge comes our way, when situations come up that we find painful or difficult, they cause us to go deeper and discover that divine nature in us that's bigger than what's going on in the world. Have you noticed that the minute a challenge comes your way, the first thing you feel is an impulse to be free of that difficulty, to be free of that pain? You know, and whether or not we single-handedly created it, or it's just, you know, through our collective consciousness that things came this way, I still believe it came to us as an opportunity for us to feel that impulse of God, to overcome the difficulty, to find our way to the other side, and to grow in our knowingness of the power and the presence of God that's bigger than the challenge that we face. And I really believe the soul draws to it whatever experiences it needs for growth, positive and the ones that we label negative. So even in this idea that we're all co-creating, I think there's a divine intelligence that knows what thought patterns you've got, I've got, everyone else has, and brings things together, positive and negative, for us to grow and know the truth of who we are as expressions of God. So the idea that many have that if you're on a spiritual path, everything is a piece of cake, let's take some responsibility for that and say, not so. If you look at the great masters, the great evolved, enlightened, what we call Christ-minded beings of Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, just study any of their lives on earth. Did they just have fun and meet nice people all the time? What they showed us is that there's an ability to respond to the situations, to not be dragged down by them, to still know our oneness with God, that you can be on a cross, crucified, and still feel your connection with love and look down at those who carried out these actions and say, I know you don't know what you're doing. You don't even understand who you really are, and still feel love. You know, I love that Ram Dass, one of the metaphysicians and authors that we study in our teachings, he talks about when someone shows up in his life that just really, really gets to him, he looks at that person as being his guru in drag. Because he said, that's the perfect person that came my way for me to notice something in me that's unhealed. Otherwise, it wouldn't set me off that way. And so I love the idea that we always have the opportunity, if we're having a negative response to something, to either say, I can stay in the negativity, or I can actually try to look for the solution, that this is something that gives me an opportunity to know God's goodness in a greater way and move beyond it. You know, metaphysician Emmett Fox told us that when we're faced with a problem, stop thinking of the problem and think about God instead. Put your attention on that greater good that could come out of this situation. You know, on Wednesday night, I spoke a lot about this idea that when we see something and we see something that's upsetting us and it doesn't reflect a lot of love, look at it as, oh, that's an opportunity for more of God's love, understanding, collaboration, whatever, to be birthed, and to put our attention that way. Put our attention on our prayers, on anything that lifts our minds to know the greater truth of that goodness of God that's greater than what's going on. When I worked in the corporate world, a great example that was brought to us of how to deal with a challenge was the example that Tylenol, the Tylenol company, demonstrated. Does anyone remember way back when someone tampered with Tylenol and there were fatalities from people taking Tylenol? What did the company do? Did it try to hide it? Did it try to suppress it? It went to the quality of what does this look like? This looks like something that people need to fear. People are now going to be afraid, insecure. They want to feel safe. So what did they do? They pulled off every Tylenol product off the shelves. They tested it. They came up with the idea of the tamper-proof caps and ways of knowing if something had been tampered with. They came to the, okay, safety is what needs to be revealed more here. They found a way to do that. Rather than feel victimized, they used the situation in a way that was positive, that actually blessed their company. And so that's why we want to constantly be doing our spiritual practice of, praying, taking our favorite scriptures and repeating them over and over again, doing our affirmations, working with our spiritual counselors, tithing, being of service, and the one that no one wants to hear about, meditation. But let me tell you, folks, the idea of sitting still and just learning to be and notice, it feels like you're not doing anything. It is such a powerful tool. And what helped me with it was when I read the ideas from the Buddhist nun Pema Chodron, who suggested when you sit down with an absolute attitude of fascination and compassion. So as you notice these thoughts that are coming up, that are so angry or so fearful or this or that, just notice with fascination and compassion, like, oh my goodness, this human experience can really be compelling. That fearful thought feels so real. If we're supposed to try to bring God to everything, bring that light and love, as Margaret said, to everything, it's also to us. In our practice, that allows us to develop the compassion for ourselves and what's going on, because from there we can start to say, okay, well, these are my fears. I know that that's not spiritually true. Let me now do my spiritual practice of prayer and working with the counselor if I need to, whatever, to get past that behavior. But it starts with being able to notice, observe, and then when we see something that doesn't serve us, to move in a different direction with it. I think a lot of you know that a theme that's come up a lot in my life in the last couple of years has been this whole idea of, as we age humanly, we tend to lose some of our independence that we have been accustomed to. I have my father and an uncle that are both in a memory care facility. My stepmother recently had to go into assisted living and leave the apartment where she and my dad lived. I have a 96-year-old friend that I'm her power of attorney that's had to move into assisted living. And it's not an easy process for a lot of people. And someone had heard about this and reached out to me because she said to me, you know, I'm going through a situation with my mom. I heard what you're going through. I'd really like to come see you. She's someone in Science of Mind, so she knows about our practices and our philosophy. She said, I think this could really help me. So we got together, and what she explained to me is that recently her mom or a doctor had revealed to the mom herself and the rest of the family that the mom should not be driving any longer. That they had to take her license away. She had had some minor accidents, but they'd also noticed that she's starting to have some perception problems, depth perception, and that the doctor said, I have to write to the DMV. So the daughter had to take the keys away. She was the closest one to do it. And she said it was so difficult, but at the same time, I knew it was for her greater good. But she said, what's really, really created problems is that now I'm the one who goes to see mom the most. We've always had a great relationship. And I swear I cannot go one single time where at some point something doesn't happen where she goes, well, you know, if I could drive, then I would have been able to. She said, even the other day, I just happened to mention, oh, I would love some ice cream right now. And the mom said, well, if I could drive, I would have been able to go get you some ice cream. And she says, and it's working my last nerve, and I don't like the way I'm feeling about it. And so as we worked together, I said, you know that this really isn't about your mom, that your responses are about something else that's going on inside of you. She may never change, but you can come to a place of peace, which she agreed to. And so as we explored what was going on, and she was really devoted, she did her spiritual work on her own. She did her meditation. She did her journaling about what's coming up. And there were several things that she noticed. One was that she was afraid herself of losing her mom. And so she went to the spiritual principle of, wait, God's love is eternal. There's no way my mom and I can ever become separated. We will always be together. We just have to be willing to accept that it won't always look the same way. And then there was the idea that she couldn't fix the situation and that for her mom, and that was frustrating. But then she thought, I don't need to fix it. I just have to know there's a greater good that can be made out of the way things are right now. When she went even deeper, she realized, oh my God, I'm doing what my mom has been doing. She had just recently been laid off from a job. She had a relationship that ended, and all she could do, her mind was spinning and spinning on how that shouldn't have happened, and how she should be back in that job, and how that relationship should have worked out. She said, there's so many things, opportunities for me to move forward, and I want to keep rehashing the way it should be, the way it should have been. And she said, as soon as she realized that, she had such compassion. Feeling the compassion for her mom made her feel compassion for herself. And it became a, you know what? Mom and I are going to grow through this together. We're going to do our work and feel God move us through this. And out of that, now her mom in the beginning didn't change, but when her mom would make the comment about, if I could drive, she would go, you know, Mom, that must be really frustrating. Let's just stop what we're doing. Where would you like me to drive you? And they did that a while, and that started to diffuse that. And then one day in her meditation, she got this idea of, you know what? She called up her mom. She said, every Sunday after church, I'm going to pick you up. We're going to go to lunch like we usually do. And then for the next 2 hours, you get in the car and you get to give me directions. You tell me where to turn right, where to go straight, where to go this way, that way, whatever. We can get totally lost. I've got my GPS, but you're in control. You get to dictate. It's become one of the most fun things they've done in a long time. Where did that come from? Noticing her ability to see how she was responding, see how she was not seeing God and God's goodness, and turning her attention back to that greater good and finding ways to call it forth. We have the ability to respond to all situations from this place of love and wholeness. Now, isn't that a responsibility we would all like to embrace more fully? So I'm just going to ask you to leave with this idea when you're faced with things in your life, and just repeat these phrases after me. God's goodness in me is greater than any life situation.
God's goodness in me is greater than any life situation.
God's ever-presence is greater than all worldly conditions.
God's ever-presence is greater than all worldly conditions.
Keep remembering that, and then we're going to have the kind of responsibility that we're seeking to see more fully and experience more fully in the world. Let's pray. So as we turn our attention inward once again, how grateful I am for that power and presence of the divine that is the one life, the one power, the one infinite goodness that is forever creating, recreating, discovering, and knowing and being itself in all things. That this one life of God is my very life. It is the life of each and every person here, every being, everywhere. And so knowing this, I speak my word, knowing that wherever there is any sense of a challenge in our lives, and a challenge in the world that looks like it's too much to handle, we change our response. We have the ability, and we remember right here, right now, to respond to it, knowing, no, God's love, God's wholeness, God's abundance, God's joy is greater than any situation we face in the world and can make good of all things. And as we know this, we open to the perfect solution, the perfect opportunities. We let this prayer be a prayer for our family, friends, loved ones. We know that just by coming together and knowing the presence of God, that this prayer is rippling out, affecting and blessing people in the world. We know that any worldly situations that grab our attention, that God is right there at the center of each and every one. And as we know this, God is revealed. And so we bless our church, we bless all churches everywhere, synagogues, temples, mosques, ashrams, all pass to God. And with a full and grateful heart for the goodness that God is always, I release this word knowing it is so, I let it be, and so it is. And together we say, Amen.